As you squeeze through a tight crevice, the darkness of the caves consumes the path from your sight. You rifle through your pack to find some flint and fashion a torch from a scrap of your cloak. The cold, damp air keeps the torch dim, much dimmer than you'd like, and you struggle to rediscover the path, but you still venture into the darkness. Suddenly, the cave shakes violently. You lose your footing and tumble down a passage. And landing in muck, your torch is extinguished. Try as you might, you cannot reignite that torch. But in the darkness, you manage to see an almost indistinguishable light. You hurry toward that light, even as you smell the smell of burnt flesh assaults your nose. The light grows larger and larger in your vision until finally you reach out, attempt to capture it. This is what we do every day as game developers. We venture into the darkness, hoping, searching for that fun, hoping to find that ultimate game. And if with any luck, we do it with a party. We do it with people together. And sometimes, unfortunately, we don't all speak the same language. So, I'm going to introduce you to myself. My name is Chad Kilgore. I'm a senior technical designer at Wargaming. I've been in the industry for just shy of 10 years. And at Wargaming, we develop World of Tanks console edition, so that's Xbox 360, Xbox One, and PS4. And as Mr. Spector suggested this morning, my mission, this is what I do, this is my mission statement, is be passionate, be curious, be honest, and do good. So that's my criteria for success. And so many people in our industry have never heard of technical design. I mean, when I first started in the industry 10 years ago, you would ask me, people like, well, what do you do? Like, I'm a bit of a programmer, but I'm really interested in design. My background's in computer science and English, so kind of this weird amalgamation of different disciplines. They're like, so you program, but you want to be a designer? Yeah. Okay, what do you do with that? And there's a point at which I kind of, over the course of my experience in the industry, like, oh, you're a technical designer. Sure, I'll be a technical designer. That sounds like a great idea. So I kind of fell into this role later on in life. And that's what I'm here to share with you today is, what is a technical designer? Why is a technical designer needed? What tools do we have in at our disposal? What do we use to be technical designers? So first and foremost, why is technical design needed? So we have our this are kind of our holy trinity of game design. Audio designers, I'm sorry. Producers, I'm sorry. This is it. I'm sorry. Okay, so we have designers. These are our rogues. We like to sneak things into the build at the last possible minute. We have our engineers, which are our mages, because we like to say program magically. That's how it got done. And we have our artists, which are our warriors, because when there is a problem, we just throw a lot of them at the problem. So who here is a designer? Or an aspiring designer? I'll allow that too. Okay. Who here is an engineer? Well, lots of engineers. All right. And who here is an artist? Fantastic. All right. So once upon a time, this is kind of how game design worked. This is what our teams looked like. We have our trinity. We have our engineers, we have our designers, and we have our artists. And these are relatively small teams. So if you look back in like 1985, these are like 2, 3, 5-person teams. These are relatively simple teams. And things were kind of easy to do. Lots and lots of programming, don't get me wrong. And as the years have progressed, games have become more and more complicated. So the engineers kind of started specializing. Now there's gameplay engineers and tools engineers. We didn't have tools before. We just programmed everything. We just hard-coded everything. Designers kind of started branching out. There's level design and systems design. And then we have 3D artists and 2D artists. I'm like, God, what are we doing? And it just keeps getting worse. And like, this is kind of where we are now. And like, I ran out of room in the circle. Like, there are so many other specializations that people have in our industry that we all don't speak the same language anymore. And it's so complex because games are complex. So this is a chart from, I added a chart, so deal with it. So this is a chart from the Super Mario dev teams. In 1985, Super Mario Brothers was developed by 5 people, which I think is absolutely fantastic. In 2013, Super Mario 3D World had a 90-person dev team. And in my mind, 90 people is still ridiculously small. There are some open world games like Assassin's Creed and some other, I'm sure, Saints Row and those kind of larger games. They can sport between 400 to 600 person teams. There was Epic Mickey 2. Warren Spector did an interview. Their dev team size was around 700 people. And I'm just going, how do you even talk to people? So going back to this, there's these disciplines that need communication. So we build bridges. So we create these new group of people that can speak the 2 different languages. So I think a lot of people here are familiar with technical artists. They are our battle mages, both artist and engineer. They are battle mages. And they bridge that gap between art and engineering. And then we have technical designers. They're similar to technical artists, but they bridge that gap between design and engineering. They're bards. I played D&D. I always liked the bard class, so that's me. I'm the weird one. I like being musical, I guess. So, why is this necessary? Because the disciplines have become complex as games have become more complex, and we need somebody to communicate between those, between the disciplines. So next is, how does a technical designer work? What tools do we have at our disposal? So first and foremost, technical designers are designers. Never forget that technical designers are designers. They need to understand how to build, how to craft player experiences. If they don't have that fundamental understanding, they're really not great designers, and they're not going to make fantastic technical designers. And in my experience, technical designers more often than not come out of systems design because of that analytical, very module way of thinking. Next, they need to have programming skills, not to be confused with nunchuck skills or bow skills. Thank you, some Napoleon Dynamite fans. All right. So they need to have a basic understanding of programming concepts. And I'm not saying they need to know C++, they need to know C#, they need to know language, insert language name here. It's they need to understand the concept. So as my wife likes to say, you can teach anybody how to code. You can't teach anybody how to program. That doesn't mean they know how to program. You need to be able to architect architect the code in a very intelligible manner. So this includes like all those non-functional requirements. So we have extendability. I'm going to build this feature to do X. Well, guess what? It's going to be X++ in the future. Well, did you write your code in an intelligible manner to do that? Portability. Does this feature, can you create this feature and move it from one project to the next project? So you don't have to rebuild the same system over and over again. We had one system that I wrote, the objective system, written super generically. We made it for a game it was a game before we worked on World of Tanks. I was like, great, we need objectives, pick it up, dropped it into World of Tanks, did some minor tweaking, and away we went. And then there's always make sure that the code is efficient and it has low memory overhead. All right, so those are programming skills. Next, we have proactivity. This is being able to stay ahead of the project. This is kind of that, or stay ahead of the team. This is kind of where, like, sometimes they're like producers. They need to be able to take that step back and see the forest from the trees, and identify where are the pitfalls, what are the choke points, and then find solutions to those problems before we even encounter them. So there's one example that I like this example. So at the end of Fear 3, as I worked on Fear 3, we ran into some problems where there was just too many AIs during a particular encounter, and it was end up crashing the game. And so that's clearly a problem. And what the level designers would come in, they'd stay late, they'd come in on the weekends, they'd crunch. And crunching is not a good way to work. And they had to recraft these encounters. So this is clearly a problem. I do not need to add a slide, thank you. So I created an AI manager for our next project because this was identified as a problem. So what it would do is, whenever an AI was spawned, I would keep track of it. We said you can have this many AI for an encounter. At any one time, you can have this many AI. So the manager would keep a tally of the number of AIs. We'd spawn one, and spawn another, and another, and another, and another, and another. Well, that's too many AIs. And I'd alert the designer. I'd throw up a big old error on the screen and say, hey, you have too many AIs, and this encounter is invalid. And then I'd delete them all. All of them. You can't play this encounter anymore. It's an invalid encounter. There's no point to balance that level. There's no reason to balance that. There's no reason to play test that because it's now an invalid encounter. Then you can go on your merry way and get to the next encounter, but that one's invalid. So what I'm doing is enforcing the level designers and the systems designers to work within the confines of our technology. This is what we've agreed to, stay within the bounds. I want to note that for the engineers and the designers, this was hidden behind a dev-only flag. So should the game ship with this manager in there, it would not actually delete everything and ruin the game experience. So there is some sanity there. And next we have empathy. This always got a laugh at work because I just destroyed everybody's AIs and now I'm being empathetic. But okay, so as bad as that somebody gets the joke. Thank you. So as some level, that last example is very empathetic because I don't want you to come on the weekends. I don't want you crunching. I want you to have a life. Additionally, tech designers, we need to use empathy to just listen to other developers, and specifically designers and engineers, to identify the problems, because more often than not, they come to us with solutions. Engineers tend to be a little bit better about this. Sorry, designers. They come to us with solutions, and we need to identify what that problem is, and then collaborate with them to actually say, this is the problem, how can we solve this together? So, what tools do we have, and how do we do this? We use, through the use of multidisciplinary understanding and empathy. I'm going to say this real quick. Empathy is probably the hardest trick or tool bag to really master. I'm still learning empathy and really understanding how to do that, and I've been doing this for 10 years. So next is what does a technical designer do? I like to say this: process is our product. We make your process better. Another way to think about this is we are buff mages. So this is what I do. I sing a song, you do a little dance, you get better, now go tag. That's what you do. I'm a buff mage. Yeah, so My job is to make you better at your job. And so first and foremost, we bridge disciplines. And I want to make this very clear. The tech design's job is not to say no. This is not working interference between engineering. Design comes to you and says, hey, I want all these crazy things. And we don't just say no and try to protect the engineers. That's not the tech design's role. Engineers are quite capable of saying no. My job is to make sure that the design is understood by the engineers. And when the engineers say no, the designers understand, no, that actually means no, don't do this. Unless it's a yes, and then engineers will do fun things for us. So that's that one. Next is prototyping. And I put prototyping in quotes here because sometimes it's a prototype and sometimes it's not. There are some cases where I've programmed a system and I'm like, this is great. Please, please, please don't ship with this. And it stays in the entire time and I cry. I die on the inside. Sometimes it is just prototyping. When we first were prototyping World of Tanks, we were looking at, trying to get the visual proof of concept, and we needed tread decals on the ground. We didn't have any means of creating tread decals. We could do footprints, but that's not really right. So what we did is we mounted guns on the back of the tank that shot lasers straight down. And they gave fantastic laser tread decals on the ground. And it was so expensive, and it was so terrible. But it gave a visual proof of concept. The guns were invisible, so it didn't look absolutely absurd, but it was a visual proof of concept for how it was supposed to work. That went in, and the engineers saw that and went, we're fixing this right now. Next is tech design does a lot of gameplay scripting. This is very kind of the tinkery stuff that engineers sometimes go to engineers with. It's like that you don't want to go to engineers with, really. Player walks into a region, turn that light on. You do not need an engineer for that. Yeah, so that's that slide. Next is automation and tools. So the tools that we have at Wargaming in Chicago are called Despair. It's a proprietary tool set, but I know that there are other engines capable of, they can be scripted, primarily used for smoke tests, but I was given these tools and now I can do all sorts of fun, terrible things with them. So automation, in this case, one example of this is we inherit a majority of our worlds from World of Tanks PC. Great games, go play it. If you don't, otherwise go play our game. And we get all of the level data, how the level is supposed to be laid out. And we could either manually put those the trees in every single location. And this is a kilometer, 1 square kilometer. And paint that tree, put that building here, put that fence here. Or I could write a script to look at that data and throw all of those objects into the world space where they're supposed to be. My level designer likes to give me a little grief every once in a while, and he says, hey, that took 4 hours to import that world. And I went, great. Is that better than the 2 to 4 weeks that it would have taken you to do that by hand? He's like, never mind. And then another one is tools. So in some cases, I have to be a tools engineer. There was a process for quest development, and I needed to write a bunch of XMLs, and these XMLs were coming to me like, please make this XML. And I was like, oh, this is terrible. Please don't make me write XMLs. So I went to my manager, and I said, I need 2 to 3 weeks to write a tool so I don't have to write XMLs. And I went, okay. And I've been supporting that tool for about 3 years now because it's been growing, and as the needs of the team have grown, the tool has changed as well. And the tool has informed the process has informed the tool, and it's continuing to grow because of it. So that is what? So what we do is remove the development, or we improve the development process for designers and remove the tinkery programming from engineers. Great, so what does all this mean? So here's some advice for those lead designers, that if there's a technical designer amongst them, like, oh, I want this person to be a tech designer, or I have somebody who fancies themselves as a tech designer. Nurture them as a designer. Remember that they're a designer. Let them be creative. Give them things to do that are design tasks. If they imagine weightlifting, you're not just going to lift your right, or just lift weights with your right arm, and you'll be super huge buff on your right arm. You'll be like, yes, this is my design skills, and here are my engineering skills. They're still they're still design. So next is utilize them as technicians. Give them technical problems to solve. That's really pretty much the end of it. And then don't overtask them. This is that weird one, because I know game development, we're always in a hurry, but you have to give them enough time to be able to take that step back and look at the process as a whole. If they aren't afforded that luxury, and I do admit that this is a luxury, if they don't have that luxury, they can't improve the process. They can't make the product that we make. That pile of treasure would be missing. Next, for all you lead engineers who are dealing with people who fancy themselves as tech designers, nurture them as an engineer. Imagine hiring a junior programmer and just saying, go make a game, and never talking to them. You would never do that. That's insane. So teach them good programming practices. Sometimes they'll come to you and ask for advice. There was one bit I was talking with one of the engineers when I was working on the tool. I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do export files. And he's like, have you looked at the visitor design pattern? I'm like, no, I will be right back. And I looked at the visitor. I'm like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I need. But that's what I needed. I needed to be nurtured as an engineer. Trust them. This is probably the hardest thing for an engineer to do, is trust the designers in the code. Our engine is very, like, there's the C++ stuff, and then there's the Lua stuff. Personally, I draw the line at the Lua stuff. I will not go into the C++. I can write C++, but that's kind of that distinction for our studio. I have as much free reign here as I want. I will not touch your code. And when you know you're doing raycasts trust them that the designer knows when they're doing a raycast every frame, they know they're doing it wrong. They're just trying to prototype something. And if they don't know they're doing it wrong, then talk to their lead and talk to the lead designer. Let them deal with them. And then this one is build your tools so that they allow for automation. This goes to smoke tests, but really is very, very powerful for populating the game's content. For example, I need to bring in all the weapon data. I've balanced all of the weapons in Excel. Well, how do you get that information back into the game? So if the tools are automated, you're good to go. So now that we have all of these tools, now that we have the ability to communicate as a party, we can go fight that dragon together. And we can find the fun and make much more interesting experiences. Do you have any questions at all? Yes?
So given I'm a student right now, senior in stuff, does the industry know, like say if I want to see aspiring tech designer, does the industry know what that is, or do I?
It depends on the studio. Some studios totally understand what tech design is. They tend to be larger studios. Some are small and are like, well, what exactly do you want out of tech design? I do find tech design is a little bit, I feel putting tech design is more respectable than putting, I'm an engineer, or I'm a programmer designer. Like that's kind of and this is purely my opinion, it's like, well, which one do you want to be? Tech design is, I'm tech design. It's like, I'm still both, but I at least have a fun title. So, anything else? Yes, sir.
You mentioned that tech design and tech artists exist, but there's another intersection of designers and artists. Why do you think they don't need a?
It's kind of interesting. So with how our studio kind of talks about it, we have the engineers and the content creators. So it's just kind of a natural, how the creative mind thinks about things versus, and I don't want to claim that engineers aren't creative. I will not ever claim that because, like I said, I come out of computer science. They kind of already speak the same language, so it's not really necessary. If it gets too far out, then I think something will have to happen and the industry will have to change and make that bridge. But I think right now we're in a space where it's not necessary. Anything else? All right, mic drop. Thank you very much.